This is a story about the music festival from hell. In September of 1972, almost 300,000 people descended on this tiny island in Illinois called Bull Island. It was supposed to feature headliners like The Faces, Joe Cocker, Black Sabbath. The promoters promised that it would be bigger than Woodstock. But when people got there, they found there was no food, no water, no bathrooms, and no headliners. This is the story of the Erie Canal Soda Pop Festival. So back in the early 1970s, there are these two young concert promoters named Tom Duncan and Bob Alexander. They had a lot of experience booking concerts, and so in 1972 they decided to put on their first music festival in Evansville, Indiana. It was a one-day festival, July 2nd, 1972, and it was held at Bosse Field. They call it, for some reason, the Freedom Festival and Ice Cream Social. And for this small festival, they've used their connections in the music business, and they've got some pretty good acts. Ike and Tina Turner, Dr. John, Edgar Winter, Howlin' Wolf. It's a really solid lineup, and the festival is a big success. About 30,000 people attend. It's covered in a bunch of local papers, including the nearby Louisville Courier-Journal, where a young reporter named Jerry Hicks covers the festival. Yes, that is my dad. And Bob and Tom make a decent amount of money, so they decide they're going to throw an even bigger festival in just a couple months. They want to have the Midwest Woodstock right there in Evansville, Indiana. But even though the Freedom Festival and Ice Cream Social was a success, the town did not like it. It brought a bunch of drugs and hippies to their town, so the mayor of Evansville comes out and says there will not be another music festival in Evansville. So Bob and Tom find a new location just outside the Evansville city limits. It's this racetrack called the Chandler Motor Speedway. But the county that the racetrack is in, Warwick County, they don't want a big music festival there either, so they file an injunction and they can't have the festival there. And then every county around them, pretty much all of southwestern Indiana, says, no, you cannot have a music festival here. The problem is Bob and Tom already told everybody that there was going to be a music festival. They've invested $700,000 into this festival, booking huge bands and advertising, and they've already sold a bunch of tickets. So Bob says, come hell or high water, we're going to have this festival. And then they find what seems like the perfect location. About 30 miles north of Evansville is a little piece of land called Bull Island. Now, it's not actually an island, it's a peninsula created by the Wabash River, and because rivers change over time, it's kind of this geographic anomaly. Technically, it is part of the state of Illinois, so all the legal trouble that Bob and Tom have gotten into in Indiana won't apply. But the only way you can get to the island is through Indiana. So when Illinois tells them that they don't want the music festival there either, which Illinois does, there's not really much the Illinois authorities can do about it because they can't get to it. So the location of Bull Island is announced just a couple days before the festival, but that does not deter attendance. They'd pre-sold about 20,000 tickets, and they were expecting about 50,000 people to show up. Instead, hundreds of thousands descended on this small piece of land. There were only two roads that led into Bull Island, and traffic backed up for 20 miles. People just abandoned their cars on the side of the road and walked into the festival. And later, a lot of these cars were broken into, stolen, or towed. The festival starts on Saturday, September 2nd. And when the thousands and thousands of music fans start pouring in, it becomes clear right away that the festival was not prepared for them. The organizers had planned on building water pumps so there was water, but there wasn't enough time, so there was only 3 or 4 water pumps for the entire festival. There was only one catering company with nowhere near enough food for 275,000 people. Other food trucks that were supposed to come in couldn't get in because of the traffic and left. And there were only 6 porta potties. 6 porta potties for almost 300,000 people. People reported that pretty soon the waste inside these porta potties was piled 2 feet high. There apparently had been a bunch of toilets that were built back at the Chandler Motor Speedway, but they hadn't made their way to Bull Island. So people just found a hill that they dubbed Turd Fields, and that's where people went. As far as bathing went, at least they were by a river. Even less than the amount of porta potties was the amount of security. There were 3 deputy sheriffs from Illinois acting as security for the entire festival. There also wasn't enough medical staff, only a couple doctors and a handful of nurses, which was a big problem because the one thing that the festival did have was drugs. Lots and lots of drugs. There's a stretch of the festival called Alice in Wonderland Avenue, where you could buy everything from acid to heroin. But a lot of the drugs were bad. There was acid that was laced with strychnine, there were people selling bleach and labeling it as cocaine. Throughout the festival, they were constantly announcing over the PA which drug vendors to stay away from, and medical staff said people were overdosing every 5 minutes. The other thing that this music festival was lacking was music. Now, some bands did show up and perform, and there was some great music. Santana, Canned Heat, Foghat, Ravi Shankar, but a lot of the bands that were advertised pulled out. no Fleetwood Mac, no Doors, and none of the headliners. Joe Cocker and Black Sabbath actually made it to Indiana, but their contract said that they were playing for 50,000 people. When they saw how many people were actually there, they asked for more money, which they didn't get, and they were probably afraid for their safety, so they pulled out. The Faces with Rod Stewart, who were supposed to close out the whole festival, when they saw what was going on, they pulled out. So this left big holes every day where no music was going on. And with lots of people, lots of drugs, no food, no water, pooping on a hill, things descended into chaos. The one food vendor that was there was so short on food that they were charging $10 for a hamburger, which is about $75 today. So people just started rioting. They tore up the trucks, they stole food, they set stuff on fire. Also food related, apparently some people were so hungry they found a cow that was on the island and killed it, but they didn't know how to butcher it and cook it, so they just left it there. And by Monday, when people finally figured out that the headliners weren't coming, they actually rushed the stage, tore it apart, and set it on fire. 2 people ended up dying at the festival, one from a drug overdose and one who drowned in the Wabash River. But given the circumstances, it's actually a miracle that it wasn't more. After the festival was over, Bob and Tom faced a litany of lawsuits. They were tied up in lawsuits for the next decade, although Bob actually continued having a long career and actually put on more music festivals. When the owner of the Bull Island land came and saw the aftermath of the Erie Canal Soda Pop Festival, the trash, the human waste, the dead cow, the smashed and burned trucks and stage, he didn't even bother cleaning it up. He just had the whole thing buried. The Bull Island Festival was a pretty big story at the time, especially in Indiana, but it's not really that well remembered, especially compared to other disastrous festivals like Altamont, the Fire Festival, Woodstock 99. In fact, somebody who was at Woodstock 99 said that when that festival started descending into chaos, there was a guy running around screaming, "It's another Bull Island," and nobody had any idea what he was talking about.
Gathered in their masses, just like witches at black masses.
Best festival that I've ever been to. Really, everything seems to be so beautiful and peaceful. There's no hassle. You know, the organisation is absolutely incredible. You know, it's just beautiful. It's the way they all should be.